Hey guys, we're back here at our Thunder Day event. Got folks that are headed out and getting our pop-ups ready to gather some signatures. It should be over on the east side and possibly the west side of the stadium. We'll, if you come down here, we'll be able to get you over to where you need to go. In the meantime, continuing our conversation with Miss Summer Parker with Patients for Safe Access.
The food distracted us.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, and we had you had a number of folks stop by, and of course, we're working to organize, returns and all of that type of stuff. But where were we?
That one. But we're kind of talking about the different things back and forth that I did have concerns about with 837 and
Yeah, so let's pick that up.
so and we talked just briefly before coming back on. One of the other things I wanted to bring up that I hadn't earlier is about interstate transfers and commerce of
Uh-huh.
cannabis. And my question and concern there was that as a grower or as a processor with 837, what would stop them from taking their entire harvest or their entire batches out of state because they only have to pay 3% to export it, right? And then here in Oklahoma, if they're going to sell it here, they have more than that in taxes. So why wouldn't they go ahead and move it out, right?
Right, right, right.
And my question also is like, is there a percentage of that that has to stay retained into the state of Oklahoma for the medical program so that we continue to have the quality that we currently have and it doesn't go downhill?
Yep. No, I follow completely. I follow completely. So should we pass? Should we, get the signatures for and pass 837? What it does is it simply within itself allows Oklahoma to be open for business for interstate commerce should there be any federal action, be it from the courts, be it executive, be it from Congress. So that's one thing to know. Just because 837 allows it until the feds allow it and set their conditions, then it's not going anywhere. And then beyond that, the states on the receiving end have to allow it into their state. So it's not going to be, interstate commerce is not going to be an overnight deal with this. Completely opposite of what we see with, say, what folks call hemp or synthetics they've derived from hemp. There's just all sorts of commerce going on that. So, and that in and of itself has a certain leveling effect until something is done to regulate that, which could be coming at the federal level in spending bills. But that has had a leveling effect and is part of what some would consider an oversupply in the market right now, right? So, but that's what 837 does. And that's one of the, again, the toughest things in cannabis is, no one can tell you what this is going to look like a year from now. And if they say they can, they're lying to themselves to begin with, right? But
binoculars into the future.
yes, exactly. But here's what we do know. Okay. The domestic market is already here. You'll have some that will be able to export. I'm sure that there will be probably some additional, even federal export controls in place that will throttle that product. A lot of folks will find that a lot of consumers may find, say in Texas, that it's easier to get Oklahoma marijuana by driving up here
Than getting it exported.
right. So, like the consumers will handle their own level of interstate as they already do, right? And then again, the thing is that we don't split two licenses where producers have to pick between, am I growing for a recreational market? Am I growing for a medical market? And by eliminating that, that's the biggest thing that we do to ensure that there is not a disruption in the products currently available as they sit. So, the last thing is that Oklahoma, still does have a lot of infrastructure in place and the ability to ramp up production as it is. And I don't see growers wholesale, like is all that's going on. I mean, Oklahoma still has a very, very substantial and will have a more substantial domestic market. I don't think that folks are just going to abandon their market share, you
Yeah.
know, to get through that.
Yeah.
So,
On the flip side of that, if I'm getting, say, $800 a pound wholesale here in Oklahoma,
mhm.
okay, but I can take that same pound and I can ship it or shuffle it over to, say, Texas or New York or something like that, where I might get 2,000 a pound, I might get 4,000 a pound, okay? So that 3% tax that I'm gonna have to pay to export ain't shit, in honesty, in return for what I'm gonna get in my price per pound back, right? So that's kind of where I was thinking about that
Right.
in the past, but now, I see more so where it's not going to take away necessarily from our medical patient because, again, like you said, it's not going to happen right away. There's going to be a lot more thumbs that will go
Hmm.
on to that before it ever takes fruition and it happens. But this is where one of those patient rights, business rights type of thing is wrapped up into 837 because it is going to have the language in there for the opportunity down the road.
That is correct. And so let's look at some of the other factors around this,
Hmm.
right? So, and you look at that, you're like, okay, well, if I can get 3,000 a pound in New York and I am only getting 800 here, why would I not want to export? Well,
Right.
now keep in mind, this is what happens if it goes federally legal, okay? So, what is to say that New York producers don't bring more production
To
online? Right? What's to
Mhm.
say other states with that ability? Oregon, do you think that they're gonna work to satisfy that demand as well? California, they're gonna work to
Mhm.
satisfy that demand. It won't be just us having to do all of that, and so that's one of the things that will put pressure on national pressure on prices going down, just like Oklahoma in and of itself by year three was putting downward price pressure on literally the entire national
Mhm.
market you know
Bring it down. Yeah,
right,
the race to
exactly.
that's
Well,
what I was
and
gonna.
the race to the bottom, as it's known by certain folks in the industry
Mhm.
side, but let's talk about what race to the bottom means to your consumer. Patience over profits, right?
Jobs. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So, like, possibly, you've got your quality drop, but see what, you know, when you say race to the bottom, if we're talking race to the bottom in prices, and not necessarily quality, because there is a lot of quality product here in
There's a lot,
Oklahoma.
right?
There's a lot of junk too. It's the same way. It's the thing. It's that way everywhere. There's no state has a monopoly on good weed or bad weed, right? And so it's that it's really interesting, with marijuana as an agricultural commodity. Fundamentally, it is a plant. This is not like rare earth metals needed to make a magnet to be in this phone. I can't do that in my backyard. Marijuana, I can.
I can't.
Right? And you look at other agricultural commodities like soybeans and
Mhm.
wheat and cotton and other things. They have something called prevent plant. Farmers can get paid not to plant certain crops. That's an agricultural subsidy that is out there. For example, milk. If there were not for federal inputs paying for some of the cost of milk production, that $3 a gallon milk would actually be $6 or $7 a gallon. So the government, when it comes to agricultural commodities, any of which you can way outproduce demand on anything. We never consume all the soybeans that are made in America.
Right.
We never consume all the wheat, which, it all from there, it all just becomes like supply chain,
Mhm.
right? And again, that's another thing about cannabis is that, the advantages that say Globocorp has over mom and pop really get minimized because a plant only takes so much input to grow. And even when you scale, let's say that you get a better deal on your fertilizers or you get whatever. Well, if you've got a grower that understands organics and literally just grows within the environment, doesn't have all those inputs, guess what? They don't have shareholders. They don't have overhead. They don't have shipping cost where they've got to get it from one side of the country to the other. And that's another thing too, is that it's like, let's say that it goes, federally legal, right? Well, so you can get that 3,000 a pound in New York, but what's your regulatory cost in addition to what if New York puts a 20% import tax?
That's
We do not know there are so many things outside of our control on this. What we're doing is just basically going with what we know to be true, which is number one, a stable foundation, not a privilege, but rights that establishes a real foundation on what we are and what we aren't. And what we do is fundamentally set up to where there is streamlined regulation and taxation. Okay. That 3% wholesale tax, given all the conversations that we've heard from folks, 3% is low. And the way we did it was that in 837, that 3% wholesale tax is not automatic. The legislature has to vote to put it into place. Okay, so that will require legislative action. Again, that flexibility we talked about earlier. But what we did was we set it as they could vote, they would have to vote for it, and we capped it at 3%. Imagine this scenario. What if we don't address it at all? What if we never said anything about any export tax, much less said it's capped here? When talk about export taxes, when you talk about federal, it's always in that 10 to 15% range. So by being proactive and establishing what that is, tapping it, making it optional, putting a cap, there's a reason why we went ahead and addressed an export tax, not because we're fans of taxation, but because if we don't address it, someone else can.
And once federal legalization does occur, because it will occur.
Right.
When that would occur, it would just, open up the floodgates for exportation with like no tax regulation to it. So again, this is, being on the front side of it, but it's weird because like whenever you're not somebody that reads bills and language very often, which I wasn't a couple of years ago, but damn if I ain't learning now.
Right.
But whenever you look at things, even for the first couple of times, you don't even really realize what each thing is and what they could be for,
Right.
unless you're behind it, helping to write it, or you've been part of the conversations and stuff, you're not even going to get it even more, So it's sometimes hard to understand. And that's why I'm glad we have all the volunteers that you have, because you've got a great team of volunteers that have been out here in the state pushing this for 2.5 months now.
Uh-huh.
And collecting signatures and just putting it out there just like the 7088 crew did.
Right, and that's the thing is that where we're what I'm grateful for and where we're fortunate is that because we are Oklahomans and this is by us for us, we've had input from hundreds of folks on policy just in general, and that forms our opinions, and it forms what we know needs to be done. And so yeah, there really is, even for what it is, there's a lot of nuance in there that really just, again, it lays down the guardrails for lawmakers. And that's exactly what that is. As much as anything else, it's a guardrail. Again, they're going to have to vote to put it on there. We assume that they will. I mean, I don't see them not, maybe we have a discussion about that at the time, but again, we want this program to benefit Oklahoma, and that's part of what goes on. And it costs money to regulate things. It costs money to have nice stuff, and so that needs to be there. But again, we wanted to put the guardrail there for what that looks like. I don't know. Nervous about what specifically?
To the ballot and potentially, into fruition.
I don't know. here's what I find with folks in government is that they will doubt us to the end. You- Well, and that's what really remains to be seen. I guarantee that conversations moving forward will be a not, there will be a big difference in what those look like if we get the signatures or if we don't get the signatures. And that's the deal. If we do, I mean, getting the signatures breaks a stigma because of all groups, it would be us stoners that managed to spring forth the largest grassroots campaign in state history. That says something in and of itself for anyone taking political notes, right? So we'll see, how we do on the signatures, and work to get those in. So yeah, I see the squad back here is telling us that we ought to take a little short break and maybe pop back. Is there something you want? Sure, go ahead. Sure.
TDR and the Dales Report podcast, and the conversation that was going to happen. Unfortunately, there were some technical things.
Yep.
They had to pop you back out, but you were going to speak on OBNDD and the 84 billion or some odd pounds. What was it? Do you mind sharing like what it was you were kind of
Well,
pointing
it's
out there?
real. Yeah, I mean, it's real simple. What we were talking about, what they were interested in is that our OBN director had gone before Congress and testified that there were basically $153 billion worth of missing marijuana out of Oklahoma in just the last year. Uh, you know, that is something that would make us the second largest agricultural economy in the world, second only to the rest of the United States. That's enough marijuana to have 75 football fields stacked 20 foot high in a year. That is 7 times current domestic demand. That is 2 times current global demand at its max. So, the issue here is, you know, if you go to Congress, much less to testify, let's get the numbers right. And the problem that we've got here is that, and we saw this with OMA's supply and demand report. It didn't address huge key factors. How much weight is lost during drying, which is a huge amount. Where do concentrates come from? They don't come from the stalks like the OMA report. And then you have OBN puts out a HIDTA report that builds on that. Then we have, let's look at where Director Anderson got those numbers from. He looked at OMA's site. It said we've got 84 million plants and said each one of those must create a pound. And so now that times 1,800 a pound, $153 billion later. And that's the thing is that, my big issue with this is, guys, none of y'all got a lie to kick it. And the problem here is that we are paying for an incredible amount of data that we have no access to, and we're getting a false narrative of a misinformation campaign laid against us that are, and that's why, what goes on with social media is so important these days, and everyone contributing and talking and sharing, because the mainstream press does not want to hear about this either. They're bought in, they're doing their deal, they all have their reasons, but it's just really a shame that, they can't address the real numbers. It's nowhere in the supply and demand report or any of their numbers did it talk about what's going on with synthetics and stuff coming in that's called hemp. That's now 35% of the market. We can't have that full conversation without talking about DoorDash's warehouse down the road. That's, I mean, if it was us, we'd be, criminal cartel drug traffickers. But if you're a corporation, you're cool, I guess. Sure. Yes.
we, we had one of the tests that come back that's like 24.08% Delta 9, 0% THCA, 0% Delta 8, straight the hell up, marijuana delivered from a DoorDash driver directly to the lab, ordered off of DoorDash's website by either myself, Anthony, or Ronnie. That is insane. That is insane. We have gas stations
Yeah,
that
give
are
me
selling
them.
Kratom and 7 mushrooms in the gas stations.
Well,
And our cannabis businesses are being bottlenecked, and we're having to fight for our rights
I know.
with 837.
Well, we've been fighting that together here the last year or so, and we'll get these signatures wrapped up and double down. Let's do it.
Well,
And we'll be back in just a minute, guys.
Yo, my name's Mo. I'm here with a house party. It's 1016 North Walker. Avenue. We're promoting State Question 837 and the signs for the signage to, if you're a registered voter, to sign up. And then I think a lot of other people have already been talking about the perks and what their reasonings for signing 837, of it being a constitutional right and all the other things. But pretty much what we're doing here at this space, we kind of have an egalitarian kitchen going. And if you're interested in supporting or trying out the pizza, we have like a State Question 837 promo code. So I think you just do ORCA 837, you get a free slice of pizza, and we'd love to hear feedback of if you think it's any good. But our main thing is this is my brother-in-law Jeff, and we help work at Havard Industries, which is we're a local testing lab, and we've kind of the last 6 months been doing live streaming out of our laboratory to kind of show transparency and kind of build trust within the industry of, it's hard to know what to trust. So what is the truth, and how do you know how to distinguish it as a consumer of cannabis? So we're trying to kind of show what the math is, and we encourage people to, if they're interested, to get on there on our live stream and maybe ask us questions, seeing what our protocols are, find out what the math is. And this is the real chemist, so he's actually the one that understands the science a lot more than I do. Me and him have been bouncing off stuff for like ever the last 5 years, and we've had some interesting situations happen that I think Jeff could probably more clarify.
Well, yeah, sure, to some degree. So my name is Jeff Havard. I'm the owner of Havard Industries. Mo's my brother-in-law. We work together at Havard Industries. So we definitely do support State Question 837. We're looking forward to being a constitutional right. We're looking forward to recreational use, to make it more free to everybody to be able to have access to it. And other things that hopefully it will take care of some of these issues that are happening in the industry in general. So kind of as Mo was talking about, like, we have this transparency project that we're working on in our lab. We're looking at trying to like live stream the inside of the lab to where people can see like us actually testing the samples. We have a live stream chat where you can actually ask the questions, see what's going on in there, and we're more than happy to tell you like how this process works and anything else that's affiliated with it. Additionally, we've had to put a lot of time, both Mo and I have had to put a lot of time at the state capitol, trying to work with legislation that's been out, trying to deal with administrative rules that don't seem to make sense, and trying to kind of hold the whole industry kind of accountable where it really hasn't before. And this has been a really big, this has been like a really big issue, but I do have to give the credit to Mo. Mo has been talking about this transparency thing for a while, and I think we were ready to kind of pull the trigger within this last year or so, and so that's kind of where we're at currently. But
Yeah, I think what's wild for us is like on the State Question 837, like him saying people having more access to cannabis and making it a constitutional right. I think some naysayers would maybe, or the people more negative on cannabis would be like, why would we want people to have more access to cannabis, right? I think that'd be probably an issue that the last rec bill ended up getting shut down. This is a different rec bill because it's making it a constitutional right. I think the people that maybe are a little bit afraid of cannabis would maybe have an argument of being like, well, why is that necessarily a good thing to have people have more access to cannabis?
yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think there's a few different aspects to look at here. So number one is that like cannabis has been in here before the legal market, in the black market, and people have been using it for, a very long time. I mean, why are we criminalizing something like that? Especially when it's being used medicinally. So the things that I like to tell people are, while a lot of people are saying it's already recreational or whatnot, is that for me, like my mother-in-law was using like RSO to try to treat symptoms of pain and things, and like we wanted her to have access to that. My dad was prescribed prescription opiates for like 20 to 30 years, which caused him severe liver damage, and giving him access to cannabis allowed him to be able to wean himself off of these drugs that were like literally killing him, and these were being prescribed by physicians. So why wouldn't we want to have this kind of access for more people?
Well, they did kind of in a way actually kill him because they cut off his opioid supply that they had him on for nerve damage for like 30 years, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then they pretty much just cut him off because all of a sudden now we need to crack down on how many opiates are going out. And someone who they'd made dependent on opioids for like 30 years. Sorry. And then cutting it out from under them, it's like, cool. I guess the doctors really do care.
Yeah, and
It's like
so
made no logical sense.
yeah, and so an option is cannabis to help them like treat some of these like chronic pain. And so why wouldn't this be freely
Yeah.
available to anybody that is trying to use it in these kind of purposes?
Well,
But
the problem is the impurities. So then you end up getting cannabis that how do you know it's actually safe? How do you know that this actually, like so you have people that are the advocates for cannabis and they're fighting for the cannabis. But then the other end is if you're letting other players in there that are then potentially putting out cannabis with with a dose of poison, you're constantly in this limbo, or of course people are going to be like naysayers and be like, I don't want more cannabis on the market. Like, right? It ends up creating this conundrum where if you're a good parent, do you want your kids to now have more access to potential product that's got known carcinogens and known neurotoxins on it? Because it's constantly an arms race with like we've been at the Capitol. We were advocating for certain pesticides. He had a great idea about, well, why wouldn't you just look and see what pesticides are more available on the market and then pull those, and those would be ones that would make sense because you're already knowing the market's buying into these pesticides. So then these would be the ones that would make sense to look for because
yeah,
that's where the revenue, whoa, yeah, especially at least on the legal grows, right? But that still creates that problem of like, even though the legal grow may be using this, who's not to say there's a new derivative or a new permethrin or a new derivative of another pesticide, and then there's not enough long-term studies. So then cannabis maybe is getting scrutinized where I see these studies that are like, oh, cannabis consumers that smoke this amount a day or whatever, and then they have higher metals, blood levels, which would make sense, but a lot of other stuff, a lot of other problems and heart disease and all these other things. And it's like, well, is it the cannabis or is it the potential impurities?
yeah, and I think that's kind of the problem here as well. The way that the system is currently going is that like the regulations move too slow. There's things that are not well written, and like I'm hoping with a recreational market, I'm hoping with more free access, and I'm hoping with being able to reevaluate these regulations and laws that are surrounding it, that we can take significant steps to help kind of fix some of these issues that we keep on kind of like screaming about to everybody.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's kind of disheartening to hear that like the same problem that's happening in Oklahoma is happening in all these other places. I mean, we've been talking to like regulators and lab managers in other states, and they seem to be having these same kind of problems. So I'm hoping with like taking an action like this, making it a constitutional amendment, that we can actually go back, reevaluate the rules, make something that makes sense and that is like more it makes a safer product for everybody.
Oh yeah, but I mean, yeah, I guess how do we get to that? If it's like if there can't be any round table conversations, if it seems like there's authoritative pool or I mean, there are certain conversations we've been having for a really long time,
Yeah.
like a super long time, because it's like, in my opinion, I've had certain biases because I'm like, well, arbitrage is like the easiest business plan. Like if you can buy a product in one place and sell it to another place for a lot more money, that's literally like the oldest business. So we've been kind of having this deliberating for like a long time about having a transparent lab. How do you build trust? And then the other problems of like if you have arbitrage happening and probably happening in New York and Florida, are we like a gateway plug? Technically, is Oklahoma cannabis reaching into other bigger markets? So it's not just an Oklahoma cannabis issue. I think it's like a national cannabis issue.
Yeah, I mean, and I believe I heard that about like somebody that was from a California grow found their products and on the shelves of dispensaries in New York,
Yeah,
if I remember correctly. And
there's
I
a
mean,
lot of interesting
so if
stories.
that's the case, like, I mean, it's very possible that there's products making it out of Oklahoma into other states. So why wouldn't we want something that we're ensuring like the safety of no matter where it goes, that it's not affecting people negatively?
Yeah, well, it's like those old gun laws where you'd have a gun law in Illinois and then Indiana is selling a lot of guns, right? Yeah, Texas, giant freaking market, you know, and we happen to have a city that has laws on microbial for your safety at 10,000, but then this is for your safety. That's the reason why I got 10,000 microbial with mold and yeast being ubiquitous everywhere. And then you have a 13 pesticide list. It's like, is it really for you can't have both, which is like rough. You get into these 13 pesticides, which obviously there's potentially hundreds of thousands of pesticides.
Well, yeah, and I feel like that's kind of a problem is like you know, you try to have these conversations and they're not happening. And so that's kind of where grassroots efforts kind of come into play, where people have to take action and do something and change it for themselves, because there's only so much complaining you can do to like regulators and legislators to change things. And if they won't, then you got to take matters into your own hands, really.
That would be a hope of a constitutional right.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think so too. When it's like
Yeah.
constitutionally guaranteed and you don't have attack on the industry overall, to
But-
where you don't feel like you're being attacked or try to be put out of business for what you're doing.
Yeah.
Then hopefully you would feel more stable in the things you're doing, the actions you're taking, and to try to better the industry without feeling like you're facing repercussions for it not being, you know, like legally, federally yet.
Well, like what that's the kind of the open debate that kind of is like, well, what's the government's role, especially in cannabis, is like, I'm not trying to demonize anybody, but it's like, did you put yourself as the stranglehold, like we're the government authority on the flow of cannabis throughout this state, but then it just doesn't look good if the regulations don't match up to like logic. If it's really about safety, you're supposed to be the middleman of safety. We've been clamoring about certain like laws of like even regulating the labs where they've reduced our resolution. So like we've had so example would be Jeff, lots of years of experience in chemistry. We had what was considered later an inferior, with new regulation that came, it was an inferior ICP. So this is like a machine we use to measure metals, right? With that machine, we were able, with Jeff's understandings and applying other pharmaceutical techniques from the past and chemistry, we were measuring parts per trillion that was ISO validated. We used to see metal samples in every single item, right?
Yeah, at least trace amounts of all the metals.
Metals are everywhere.
Everything,
Yeah,
so.
metals are in everything. So with certain regulations, they said, well, we have to upgrade our ICP. So we had to get a more expensive piece of equipment that was a more sensitive instrument. But with the protocols that they have kind of mandated, it made us lose our resolutions by 1,000, right? So we went down to parts per billion.
Yeah, so I think the problem was with the standardization that they're trying to enact in place without really consulting anybody. We bought a more expensive piece
At
of
least not
equipment.
consulting us. At least not.
Well,
consulting us.
yeah, for sure. At least not consulting us. So
Yeah.
but
We're
we
not in
bought
the
a
group.
More expensive piece of equipment and then used worse methods to test with. So it was like we could have done better with it, but then instead we use these worse methods and and
Well,
like
and
now the
worse
testing
wouldn't be
quality's down.
subjective. That's actually factually worse. It's like you're not just saying subjectively, oh, it's worse. It's like you have the facts that this is debatable because we're not measuring to this sensitivity, this parts per trillion. That's a pretty insane. We same deal with mycotoxins. We'd measure them for one period of time. We measured them for fluorescence detection.
Yeah.
Which is like 40-year-old technology. Had been measured by FDA, uses it that way. And then for the laws, we have to measure it. We can't measure it through. That's not the deemed way. It's LCMS, correct?
Yeah, so we have to use the LC triple quad by regulation for measuring of mycotoxins. But yeah, there are other methods. There are other ways to go about measuring things. And I think kind of the problem is that I think in order for regulators to try to make it easier to do their job, they're just limiting it to one piece of equipment, like one chemical manufacturer for where we're getting our calibration standards and checks from, and just one particular way of running it. But like the truth is, like there's a bunch of different ways that we could actually measure these things, and it's basically killing innovation. It's making the data quality worse overall. And I mean, how are we supposed to progress and grow and like adapt with the times with like the new potential issues, the new analytes, the new microbes, the new mycotoxins, whatever it is, when we're just like completely constricted? So that's where I'm hoping that by changing, by changing, hopefully with the changing it constitutionally and reevaluating the rules, that we might be able to like fix some of these like fundamental flaws of the way that it's operating now. Because the way that it's operating now is really just it's just making everything worse.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of one of our big things of why we've been deliberating for like probably 5-6 years on having a transparent like lab. And I think that's kind of one of the big headaches with it, is you can have the most experienced auditor come into a laboratory And there's so many there's so many holes in the steps, and when you're testing something that can alter and affect the numbers, the end consequences, like the numbers. So how do you know that potency is consistent? How do you know that this, sorry, flies,
Yeah.
they love me. I don't know if that's a bad sign, or maybe I stink. I think knowing like how accurate the numbers are. 'Cause some people I've heard other labs kind of debate, well, this is the reason why we need standardization, because different machines will output different pretty much different results, different
Yeah,
methods.
that's true, but that's kind of where we come out and say, like, so for the labs, we're required to do proficiency testing each year, which means that it doesn't really matter what instrumentation you use. It doesn't matter who prepares it. It doesn't matter which methods you use or which calibration manufacturer that you use at all. Like, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, it matters that you get the correct result for whatever the sample is. So like if it's spiked with certain amounts of metals or pesticides or microbials, that you're able to like accurately detect when they're in the sample and when they're not in the sample, both of them, because both of those are very valid,
Yeah.
whether they're in there or not, right? And so like it doesn't matter which piece of equipment, like I said, it doesn't matter who prepares it or what method you use. Like this test is there to just show that you can get the correct answer
Yeah.
like repeatedly. So there's already things that are in place that we're already doing as a laboratory, which makes it kind of like pointless why we'd have to use just this one piece of equipment or this one technique. Um, but like I said, I think it just makes it easier for regulators to try to come in and audit when they only have to know how to do it this one way. But the reality is, like, I always use this analogy with like cars and all of that. Like, basically, you're trying to force us to use a Honda Civic in order to get your test results with, right? But we all know that there's hundreds of car manufacturers and there's hundreds of models, and all of them are capable of getting you from point A to point B. And they're all the correct way. As long as you get from point A to point B and you can do it like safely and reliably, it doesn't matter which way that you do it. But if you don't understand that there's like different manufacturers and they're from different countries, and like there might be different ways that you operate all those vehicles, it doesn't really matter. That matters that you've achieved your goal here and then you've done it correctly.
Yeah. From my uneducated bias, I would think it's a cop out to say, oh, well, this is why you have different brands. This is why you have Agilent. This is why you have a lot of different Thermo Fisher. This is why you have different brands. So it's like to use the excuse of, well, we have differing equipment. That's why the results are so drastically different. I think is like, I mean, my uneducated self thinks that that's like a cop out. It's an excuse that doesn't really have its merits in like scientific principles. Like that's why you have the external proficiency test. That's why you have other things that are third party that are validating you.
Well, I mean, even at that, like if there was only one piece of equipment that was actually valid to produce results, then everybody would have only that one piece of equipment, right? Everybody would just have a piece of yeah, just like a very specific like HPLC or UPLC or whatever they're using to measure things with. Like there wouldn't be a point of having anything else because that would be the only piece of equipment capable of doing these measurements, and there'd be no way to pass these tests any other way.
Well, there's certain things that like, isn't there an argument, like one of the arguments on the new pesticide panel was that you were kind of really bringing up in the beginning was that a lot of these ones on the pesticide panel can't just be measured by LCMS. You have to do GCMS as well.
Yeah, so I mean, if we're actually like referring back to a lot of scientific literature, we're not talking like a paper or two. We're talking like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of peer-reviewed scientific articles showing that like you're using a combination of both like LCMS or LCMSMS or GCMS or GC triple quad, like whatever the pieces of equipment, there's like multiple options, but you're having to measure these on different ones because there's better sensitivity on one piece of equipment versus the other. And right now we're being forced just to use it all under like the LC triple quad, but that isn't always the best way to measure it. And then same thing with mycotoxins as well. The mycotoxins are also being forced to be used under LCMS. Well, what if it's better to be measure some of them with like fluorescence? What if some of them are better measured, like of the pesticides are better measured with GC, but you want us to use worse methods or trying to consolidate it all into one because it's just easier?
It seems more difficult.
It's science. Like it's just science. Like it's however the best method of detection and the most resolution that you can get is the way that you should be doing it. you shouldn't be constricted just because it makes it easier for someone else to do an audit.
For a regulator.
To
Yeah.
me, it just means that like whoever is actually coming in and doing the audit is just going to have to be more knowledgeable about more different types of equipment, about calibrations, about certain methods and things and how they're being followed. Like it just requires somebody with more experience, and that's just really what it comes down to.
Wow. So yeah, that. So, but that's what kind of what a lot of people maybe don't understand is that's what ISO is for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is an external auditor that come in, and these are people that are familiar. They've looked across like, like numerous labs and numerous methods and numerous pieces of equipment, and they are very experienced in that. And like, in fact, I would say I'm pretty sure that every state requires that the testing labs be ISO 17025 accredited.
Mm.
But yeah, these auditors that are coming in are experienced with all of these different pieces of equipment and methods and things, and making sure that people are doing it correctly. So it does.
Well, they're validating your method, but the truth of the matter is they can't really know. It's impossible for someone to really look at your, because what we were talking about earlier, there's so many points that have like points of failure that you can manipulate data. So even the most experienced scientists can be looking through a lot of your paperwork and look through your data, and they would still have no idea.
Yeah, so we wrote an editorial article about like the problems with standardization, and that was kind of one of the things that we pointed out is that there are so many different places where if you don't record like how you dilute samples before you put it on equipment, or if you let some sample evaporate to let the numbers go up, like there's like literally hundreds of ways that you can manipulate data, make it show up correct on the pieces of equipment. And so when an auditor, whether it is an ISO auditor or a regulator for the cannabis industry that comes in and looks at it, it's going to look like the data is correct, but it's absolutely not.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, let's say I was going to have a micro failure and I end up diluting it 1,000 or 10,000 times more than it was supposed to be, and now my numbers are passing.
Yeah.
You go look at my data and it's like, of course it passes. Do you see all the records?
Yeah,
Like,
it's not. Yeah.
so yeah, so there's a problem with that as well, and that's kind of where we feel like transparency is like probably a very good solution to taking care of some of those issues. Like you're on camera, people can see what you're doing. They can see you prepping the samples. Like if you're doing something that looks weird, they could call it out on a chat.
Yeah.
I mean, like how else do you hold these kind of things accountable?
Or
Like,
hold
you know that you're
ourselves.
being like
Hold
watched.
ourselves accountable.
Yeah, so I mean, for us, it holds us accountable, and we think that if other people were doing this as well, it would kind of do the same thing. So I mean, there's so many people out there saying like, "Oh, I don't trust lab results," or like, "Yeah, they're all over the place. You go to like 10 different labs and get 10 different results." Well, with the ISO structure, with the PT testing, like that really shouldn't be the case.
Well, the case just comes down to like everyone needs money at the end of the month. So, I mean, just facts wise, like at the end of the day, it's like, okay, if you can get higher numbers, which have economic incentive to no offense, like for the public that, it's like you're trying to get your best price point. Everyone's trying to get the best value for their dollar.
Yeah, but that's
Their
true,
perception of the value for
that's
the
true.
dollar.
But you go pick up a product on the shelf when it says that it's like a 30% THC and you're actually only getting like 15 or so,
Yeah,
which
it's a 12.
on it,
Yeah.
yeah, or even
whatever.
less. I mean,
Yeah.
and we've run a couple studies where we see like the majority of samples that we were testing were all inflated for potency. So if I'm buying like something that's supposed to be a 30 and I'm getting 15, I'm getting ripped off. And how is anybody okay with this? Like, how are you okay with like paying premium prices and getting half of a product? Like once again, going back to a car, like I go buy a brand new car and then after I pay for it, I get half of it. Like, should I be okay with that? Am I going to be actually like
Yeah.
accepting of that?
Well, then
I'm not. And
Yeah.
I want to make sure that whatever results that we're putting out, that we're giving like honest results and that people aren't getting cheated.
But then the other end is we can't validate where the sample comes from either.
Yeah, and that's a point. That's something we pointed out again and again. It's like
Yeah.
the point of us like trying to do this off the shelf testing is just
plausible
to see like
deniability.
what is actually going out there, because like whatever sample is delivered to us at the lab, we're reporting it, and like those results are just how they are. But if they are different off the shelf, like we can't really speak to that. We can't guarantee the sample that comes to us, or
Then it creates
if it's representative of the batch. I mean, we ask people to do that, but
then it creates that other filter of plausible deniability. So then now you as a consumer don't know whether, okay, is it the grow or is it the lab? Which is it, right? So who's inflating numbers, or who's adjusting it?
Well, so that's kind of where we felt like the secret shopper program that the OMA set up would have been like very helpful if it was like functioning.
Or
Because that way it's
yeah,
like
transparently
yeah,
functioning.
it's like if you're putting these products out on the shelf, right, and if they get picked up and they're tested and they're not matching, like, well, either the lab did wrong or somebody else did wrong, or maybe the sample wasn't representative. Like, there's a whole slew of issues that it could actually be, but
They
um,
could have just kept up. They could have just kept having an audit each month and just publishing all those, right? It's like, hey, and it could have easily. Here's the lab. Here's the batch. Here's the lab. Here's the grow, right? So batch attached to it, and then here's the results at this date, right? Date that it was taken originally, the original date, right? So then maybe yeah, you do see some cannabinoids that shift over, right? But obviously the cannabinoid percentage should stay the same. THC might degrade a little bit into evolves.
yeah, if they
So
just cascade.
yeah, so what would have been cool is they could have easily done like a monthly report, in my opinion, and then us as consumers could be like, okay, I can either tell, I at least getting this monthly report, I can see something's going on here. This one doesn't add up. It's like
Well,
whether it's the grow or it's the lab,
yeah,
right?
that kind of brings another point that we're really curious about is like we would really like to be able to see like metric data just to see where the trends are and these things, or just see where like there's like undue shifts or things that just don't quite seem to make sense. So metric data, some of it like having more accountability and transparency and like the results that are available from like the state as well or the administration. I mean, those things would be very helpful, and those are things that we're like absolutely fighting for in this next legislative session to like to have the ability to go look at these things and just see, kind of where we're at. And I think that's kind of addressing what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, I think what we were one of there's some other labs that have been kind of interested in us doing the transparent lab that we've kind of gotten to meet through our A2LA auditor. L2 A2LA is kind of one of the more stricter ISO validators. They one of the ISO auditors, she's kind of sent our stream out to a couple other one lab in Michigan and one lab in California that are some pretty interesting guys. And they were kind of letting us know from some of their data and their research that the states that seem to have more transparent, more public information on metric data uh, seem to actually have a better market value, that their markets were actually holding up on the price per pound compared to states that were very secretive with the metric data seem to bottom out the market and end up being more of a race to the bottom. Then you end up guys like one of my friends, Gary, that's here. He used to be a grow across the street from us. And sometimes I feel bad for him. I'm like, man, if we would have, it's like I feel bad for him because he's an honest grower. He was an honest grower. He wasn't chasing after like certain genetics to get him high THC, but he had really good medicine. It was between like 19 to 22, 23%
Which is the national
THC.
average anyways.
Yeah, it's the average. It's the real, yeah. And he had pretty interesting terpene profiles, and he cared. He wasn't spraying it with any type of ridiculous pesticides or anything like that. I remember begging him kind of at one point, like, hey, go to another lab to survive. Like I was like, just go to another lab, dude. And he just wouldn't do it. And I'm like, man, if we would have been a little bit more inflating on the THC numbers, maybe he would have survived. But then at that point, eventually something else is going to end up eating you anyway. If the regulatory body, no offense to really the state at all, but it's like if you're setting up a game that doesn't really empower guys like Gary or growers that are trying to do it honest, it's like, what's going on? Like, well, how is this working out? And it's really
Yeah, and
disheartening.
so kind of as you're saying that with like being able to have like transparent data, I think one of those some of those same labs that we spoke to were showing us that there was like data from other states, such as I can't remember if it was Washington or Oregon, but they were publishing like all these reports and like all these COAs and just data overall that people could review. And I mean, they're kind of like taking steps towards transparency. And yeah, same thing. Like when you actually have that kind of accountability and you have people trying to make sure that there's products that are safe and that are actually checked that are on the market. Yeah, it was like sustaining the prices and making those prices better and keeping the market from crashing. So I'm really hoping that by us, like trying to be like as honest as possible with like the numbers, like trying to provide good science, trying to provide things that are like accurate for people, that we're kind of helping to contribute to making the market better, and like I said, holding ourselves and other people accountable as well, whatever it is that we're checking out.
He's been he's really humble, but he's been really great at teaching me a lot. And I need analogies a lot of times. So you've gotten really good, like over the years, of just giving me analogies that I can like relate the science to. That's kind of one of the things that we're kind of hoping with our live stream in our lab, that it can actually turn into don't be intimidated just because it says science.
Well, yeah,
Or
and we really love talking to people and kind of teaching this stuff. So, yeah, I read this book probably like 15 years ago by Carl Sagan, and he was talking about how important it was to make sure that everybody is able to understand science and the concepts. Like, even if you can't do math, even if you can't do science, like I do my best to try to explain it and to explain the concepts into like the like easy to bite pieces and things to understand and
Relatable.
relate to, just so like we want everybody to be able to see his test results and still be going like, I don't know what the hell any of this means. I want you to like look at it, understand it, and be able to call out the bullshit for yourself. If you see bullshit, like I want you to be able to
yeah.
call people out on it, like whether it's us or somebody else,
Yeah, even if like that's kind of the whole accountability is like if you see us do something that doesn't make sense, it's like ask, or maybe we did do it wrong. That's kind of the whole argument. Obviously, we try. I think for what we've been trying to do, we try our best. Not that we're the bearers of truth, but I think we try our best to be as accurate as we can be. Like obviously, we're not testing each item 10 times and then taking the average. That just would not be affordable, especially in a market that's the race to the bottom, and you're wanting accurate results and you're wanting it for the cheapest price possible, with the consumables potentially only going up in cost.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that that's something that we like really kind of pride ourselves on and focused on too, is like the fact that like we have dialed in our methods so well, and that we are continuously always doing method validation to make sure that our method is good, and that like it still has accuracy across a wide range of like sampling and conditions and things, that it's that you're still going to get results no matter no matter what.
Yeah.
So I mean, we've poured like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours into doing that, and we're like every weekend well, I can't say every weekend, but a lot of
Correct.
weekends we're still there, like rechecking
Sure.
things, seeing if like there's any optimization or improvements to those methods, and always pushing forward to try to do better, and figure out more things about it. Like,
Should we talk about some of the stuff of wow, like kind of we're not trying to be adversarial really to the state, but just certain things of what with us being, I think, transparent, and it's like it's like kind of what were we expected to do, just kind of like roll over. It's pretty much either with kind of what's happening with a lot of these consent agreements. And same deal for us. We've had them audit us and then say, years later that we were out of compliance.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's kind of something that we're in the middle of right now, of basically trying to figure out if we're going to get fined or not for things that we're saying that we didn't do, that we completely disagree with
Yeah.
some of these points. And so, yeah, that's kind of where we've been at. We've been making it public that we had this disagreement with the OMMA, and that like we're in their administrative process, but we're also more than happy to discuss any of these points or anything that's gone on, or share any documents or information. So yeah, we feel like that's kind of important too. It's like whatever's on this other side and the things we're dealing with the OMA, we're more than happy to share this data as well. Like when we say we're transparent, we mean even
Yeah.
this part too.
Yeah. One of the points that we always the kind of one of the points, not trying to be again adversarial to OMA, but it's like if you really wanted to see kind of interesting activity, why not be more open with the metric data, so you can find the kind of outliers and the other information. And then it seems like it's like, okay, so you're okay with people faking numbers, and then afterwards, not trying to be, it just looks that way. If then afterwards you can just sign a consent agreement, pay a not technically a fine. How is it? It's pretty much you're consenting that you were out of compliance, but you're gonna pay like what is it?
Monetary fee of sorts. I don't know.
What is it called? It's like a what would that be called? Like it's not a monetary. I mean, it's a fee. It is pretty much a fee, but they were calling it something else. What the semantics of it?
I don't
It's
know.
pretty much another version of a fee.
That's, or yeah, a fine or something, I guess.
It's like a, what is it? Pretty much a compromised price for your fines.
Yeah.
What is that? What is it? What's that? Why can't I think of the word? I'm an idiot. But so one of the things with this is what's weird is that it's like almost like the way that it's looking that they're allowing this, it pretty much makes it seem like, well, for the last, if for a business sense, it would have been in our best interest for the last 5-6 years to just inflate THC numbers, then just pay a fee later, and have a lot of clients come over, have them pass micro, which we have a lot of people leave because sometimes people fail micro. Sometimes people don't like their potency numbers, right? And then they lab shop around, which everybody knows it's been happening across all
lab shopping
nations.
is definitely a problem that I
Yeah.
hope we get to address. So.
Yeah, I think it'd be cool. Like, I mean, for us, it's like, yeah, with the other labs, I think it'd be cool to do like a transparent science movement. And if the other labs would like to, live streaming is not very expensive. There's literally some iPhone cameras, and there's like certain softwares you can use that, for us, I'm like, that's the pretty cheap way to have like accountability, especially in like any of these science fields. It's just hard to know what's biased or what's not, like what's true. Sorry. Yeah. But yeah, I think for us, what's interesting is seeing that these consent agreements are happening. And so pretty much it's literally saying pretty much break the law, or break the law, or break the ethics really, then pay the fee later. And now you can proceed forward, rather than actually it's like, well, if you've been inflating numbers for however long, which means you've probably gotten a good amount of the revenue in the market. And then now any new regulations that you can say, oh, you need a $500,000 GC in order to measure pesticides to this amount. You're the only one in the market that can afford it. So it's a pretty smart business move. It just may not be ethically sound or for patients. It may not be for the safety or interests of patients.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I guess we just said it.
Yeah.
All right, excited.
So.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm hoping that we do get to have an open conversation with people. We very highly encourage it. We really hope that State Question 837 helps to fix some of these problems, and that we can all somehow band together and make the market better.
Yeah, I think that'd be dope. Yeah, I think us signing would be great. Anyway, thanks for your time.
Yeah.
Letting us talk. Thanks, guys. Sorry.
Howdy, howdy, y'all. Jed Green, director here at ORCA with,
Jeremy Woods, Wild West Compliance.
and it is 420.
Look
Do
at
you
there.
know where your medication is? I
You know
do.
if it's safe
It's
to
right here.
consume.
That's right. Well, see, this is home grow.
There you go.
I have no doubts because I watched this thing from a seed. So good stuff. Good stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. So when we were last on, we concluded with wanting to come back and talk about the interim study on abandoned grows. I
Yes.
think it was.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Yeah. So that took place this past Wednesday, so 6 days ago. House Alcohol, Tobacco, and Controlled Substances Committee. The video is available on the House website. You got to know how to find that. I think it's been posted a couple of times online. Maybe we'll get back and double back on that here after signature gathering and talk about it a little bit more. But a lot went on.
I highly recommend everybody go back and look at it.
Yep.
See what's going on. The legislation was actually asking some really good questions,
Yeah.
you know, about the abandoned grows and the bonds,
Yep.
you know, about how 0 of them's been actually pulled. Who actually has control to actually pull the bond.
Yep.
You know, I know I did one of my live feeds about it, you know, talked about I wish I was smart enough to be a lawyer because I would like to know, can they legally pull the bond or can they not? Because they've never pulled any,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but at the same time, the paperwork says OMA has to be the one to pull the bond.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
how is that fair to our county commissioners? I know that one sheriff, I believe he was from Garvin County,
Yes.
was talking about how their county was out so much money from having to dig the holes and the diesel fuel to burn the product. You know, why is it not allowed for them to call in the bond to recoup some of their money? OBN as well. Why is it not allowed for them to recoup some of their money? They're out for their agents
Mm-hmm.
because everybody's out there. They got plenty of hours tied up in it.
Mm-hmm.
I know I've seen several of them that have been raided and they've got hours amongst hours getting rid of product and they're sitting on sites waiting because they can't do anything with it because they haven't had no hearings for it.
Mm-hmm.
But where's the bond cleanup bill coming in at? You know, it's a lot of things we've talked about in legislation. Legislation writes rules for it, but nothing's getting implemented.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Are we wasting taxpayers' money writing these regulations and not following through with it? And another question I have on that is, if we're writing the rules and not following through with it, who actually decides if they can or can't follow through with it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not that smart, and I know I'm not, but I wouldn't mind visiting with some attorneys to find out.
Well, and that's the and that's the thing is that this is something that I think in that study that that there were some really good questions and kind of starts to there's a lot of framing that needs to go on here to and some more numbers that would really help us quantify
Yes.
kind of what this is. And so when I saw this interim study get posted, as okay, interim study on abandoned grows, no list of speakers or anything, just Representative Rowe wanted to do the study, and so anyway, long story short, I was delighted to see that this wasn't that there were some real questions asked. My fear in this is, okay, abandoned grows, how do we fix this? We tax the shit out of the legal industry that had nothing to do with this.
Yep.
Right? Like, I mean, that's just kind of what we've seen in the
Yes.
past. And it is taxation. It wouldn't matter if they called it a fee increase or anything like that. At the end of the day, your fees pay for regulation of you as a legal industry. Your fees are not to pay for dealing with illegal operations. Okay. Now, if it's currently a license deal, they're doing illegal stuff. Well, yeah, they're regulating that.
Correct.
But as far as, if there is no license, no registration, it's just a straight up guerrilla grow, our fees are not for that purpose. Those have to come out of other enforcement fees, right?
Yeah.
So, you get concerned about them wanting to tax us, just randomly because that's what they like to do. So it went to the deal, and like a lot of folks, or folks that have seen it, I think that there were good questions asked.
I think so too.
And I kind of just kind of off the top of my head, I'm going to run through a couple of the things that I recall and see if I can shed some additional perspective for everyone. I mean, policymakers, the general public that wants to know where the auctions are.
Yeah.
More and more questions about where are the auctions, right? And so, going down the list here, the first good question was by Representative Fettgetter was, what's the definition of an abandoned grow?
Yeah.
It's a classic case where everything is going to hinge on a definition of what that is. Okay, so let's look at this. So, let's talk about the perception. The perception is, we've had a constant Facebook feed from OBN for 2.5 years, something on at least once every 2 weeks on the news. Grow gets busted, bad guys, and moving on to the next. Well, the question we all ask ourselves is what happens then? Well, the assumption is, everything we know from narcotics enforcement is that, okay, grow gets busted, land gets seized, land goes to auction. Okay, well, that's what happens if you have a clear-cut, actual illegal grow that is completely criminal with, and this is important, no licensure or registration. You're automatically in that group. Now, of everything that we have seen to what we know at this point, only 17 of those properties have actually been seized. And so there's kind of a rule of thumb here in property forfeiture, is that you have to actually get a conviction on something criminal to be able to seize the property. Okay, you can be pulled over, your cash taken away, and they can say, well, you were under suspicion for this, but if they can't prove it, they eventually have to give you your money back. Okay, it's criminal in nature what does asset forfeiture.
Right.
Administrative is a whole different ball of wax.
Yeah.
And so what happens is that most of these places have been licensed and potentially registered. Okay, remember, before everyone was declared a bad guy, there were a couple of agencies that licensed and registered everyone in here, bad guy or not. It didn't matter if there were 400 emails attached to one, the 400 licenses attached to one email, they didn't even bat an eye at that.
Right.
So they let everyone in. Okay, so everyone's now licensed and registered, which gives them certain protections that there are administrative proceedings that have to go on when something goes like this. So a lot of what we have seen have been basically glorified administrative actions when it comes to folks' legal standing. And so even if they come in and they say, oh, you've done this illegally because your registration was a day out of date, or you didn't have some metric tags or something, this is all administrative. And if it's resolved in the administrative process without criminal proceedings or a criminal conviction, they can't seize the land.
That makes sense.
They can't seize the property.
Yeah.
And so what they've done is, by doing this, because some of this is administrative, what they've done is create a situation where they came and wiped out the business. Maybe it needed to happen, maybe it didn't need to happen, but it happened. And now there's this limbo. You notice how consistently investigation ongoing. One of the questions that got asked, you've had 300 arrests since 2022. How many of those have resulted in conviction? Well, the investigation's ongoing. Oh, the investigation's ongoing. So what that means is that the abandoned grows are still basically the responsibility of the agency who initiated those proceedings, because until those are cleaned up, we don't know, is this seizable, is it not seizable, what's going
legal battle.
Right, exactly. And so that is the one of the quagmires here, where OBN's enforcement actions tend to bite off more than surrounding agencies can chew, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does, because like on the OMA side of it, it states that they can actually call the bond for administrative fines or a violation. It actually doesn't even say it has to be a fine. It just says a violation. They can actually seize the bond for it. But, you know, like when we was talking off camera, so the bond company's then going to fight it because they don't want to give up the money.
Right.
But at the same time, they've only got a year to pull it. If according to OMA and according, I think it's the state legislation, I'd have to go back and read it, but they have 1 year to use that bond after the license is done.
Mm-hmm.
So how many times have we seen these licenses be inactive and they're still in administrative proceedings a year later?
Well, and it's a really good point. That's something that again, it was great to hear Fetgetter, ask OMMA point blank is how many of these have you ever called? Zero. And from what I understand from folks that write these, that none of these have ever been claimed in 7 or 8 states that have them.
Yep.
And so, I mean, this is, and we made this contention when the bill was coming through that this is just giving money from one industry to another. This is like socialism or some shit, So the issue here now is so now let's look at this scenario where, okay, administrative action, we're a year and a half, 2 years later, even if they had a bond at the time, the administrative action is drug out so long that they can't even actually go out and reclaim the bond because they didn't process the administrative action in enough time to claim the bond. So we paid for something that in theory would have taken care of this, but because of the nature of the pace of the process, the state basically, and in this case, and it is specifically OMMA.
Yeah.
But I don't have it off the top of my head, but I've heard a very solid, rational argument based on the language that is there from some of the bond writers that even OMMA may not be able to actually collect that bond.
I've heard that. I have heard that. They said it would end up going into a very big legal battle to see if they can actually justify them claiming it.
Mm-hmm.
So my question on that was, okay, so why do we have that in legislation? Why are we wasting the people that want to do it correctly? Because you know as well as I do, it's a starving industry. I mean, there's a lot of people hurting right now just trying to survive. But why are we wasting money doing that? If they can't use it, why even waste the money on it?
Right. I mean, there are other ways. When I think about, and so, the conundrum that was presented, and is, exactly what, so what do they do? I mean, there's even some more nuance, but, so you've got OMA that may or may not be able to claim this, limitations may be up. Here's the thing. One of the problems we have, and this is where it really hurts us when we don't get really any real data out of the agencies, like ask OBN. Again, when they report what they've done, it's we had this many grows, there are many grows left. Everything in there was illegal that we eliminated, one way or another.
Yeah.
Not anyone that just went out of business or, there's no accounting for that, and we don't get that.
Yeah.
And, it's like on the, so, if we saw that, how many were administrative? How many were criminal? How many of them simply did not re-register? Let's get some honest numbers. And if we get that, then we can actually start to quantify how many of these are abandoned. OBN, tell us, how many of you got stuck in administrative action? I don't know is not an acceptable answer. You should know that, And so if not, then I'm going to question all of your accounting practices, your budget, how you're spending your money. I mean, you got to at least be able to tell us how many you have pending with some basic categories that says, okay, how many have been pending for this long? Okay, did they have a grow bond check with OMA? I mean, a couple of folks in a hot minute could really run this down a little bit.
I know you may or may not agree with this, but I'm just going to throw it out there. I think they'd have been better off instead of having to initiate a bond is say, hey, instead of doing a bond, we're going to put $2,500 in a kitty from each grow, and we're going to use that as a cleanup.
Mm-hmm.
Once it caps off at this much money, we're not going to ask you guys to put another year's supply of money into it until we've used it. And then we could actually went in and use that money to clean up and not had to have lawyers or go to administrative fees.
And that right there is right there. The rural and urban waste remediation fund is something we proposed in our last state question, 818,
Yes, sir.
3 years ago. So we've talked about policies that would work and we said you should do that as opposed to this. They did the bond anyway.
Yeah.
Then now what this is really is just going to be money down the toilet for everyone involved. And now here's the thing though, these are all folks that are out of business. Okay, so now if you attempt to impose that on the industry for these, that is taxation. That is, that's taxation. That's not doing anything to regulate the industry.
What's going forward?
I would throw this out here just as a pod because I think we're gonna we'll take a quick break, maybe come back and pop on this or pop in a little bit more on something else. But this is going to be an ongoing conversation, obviously. But one thing that I see two agencies operating off of the same budget that they were 3 years ago when they had 4 times as many licensees. If you don't have that many licensees, seems to me that there's probably some dollars that could be reappropriated from what is being appropriated in their budget right now that maybe could go into a fund that helps support those local governments in taking care of the cleanup on the ground. So, yep.
So I know you take a quick break, but there used to be, I don't remember what state statute it is now or what bill it was, but there used to be for the counties, they'd get $5 million out of the OMA fund for supplying a deputy to help OMA.
Yep.
I don't know if that's still in effect or not.
They did wind up getting a little trickle, but that's I think that's where there should be some more conversations with folks at the and I've been working on that some, but the folks at the county levels. And again, that's one thing for everyone out there on 837. We divide that revenue up down to the local government levels.
Yes.
Then that in and of itself, if there's no legislative action, if we were to get 837 done, guess what? We're giving the counties the dollars they need.
Which is what's
That's right. It's a pretty perfect petition. All right. Well, we'll take a break and
maybe
pop back. So. Howdy, howdy, everybody. Jed Green, director here at ORCA. I'm with,
Jeremy?
and we are sitting here just kind of chopping it up, talking about some of the policy stuff going on outside of 837. Speaking of which, we're getting on the back half of our Thunder Day effort down here. We've got folks that are out working on gathering signatures over around the game, and we'll be here for the rest of the evening. Pizza's great. Appreciate folks here at Open House doing this. One thing I wanted to mention is as we're in this final push, as we're in this final drive here, let folks know you don't have to have a medical card to go into a dispensary and sign 837. They just need to simply go in and say, hey, I'm here to sign the petition. And there you go. The map's available at orca4ok.com. So that's just something I wanted to get out there. Make sure, folks know it's all about reaching out to your friends and family right now.
Yep. And even if you got your kid, don't leave your kid in the car. You're allowed to take that kid in with you. As long as you are their parent or legal guardian, it's completely compliant with regulations.
Yep. So when we were talking just a minute ago, we were kind of talking about this, about the issue of abandoned grows, and that there had just been a hearing on it, and kind of noted that it was good that lawmakers kind of dug in. It wasn't just kind of a horse and pony show thing, and then we get some random bill a month and a half from now that is a misguided effort to solve a problem that may or may not be there, and that good questions were being asked. But I think kind of where we left it off, I was going on about the need for more hard numbers from the agencies. What is the status of some of these different properties, or where are they at in the administrative process? And a lot of that dictates who can do what when.
Yeah.
And yep. And the need for, potentially the solution being for, our lawmakers to put some resources down at the local level, and you let those local county commissioners that have that equipment, those local sheriffs who, got the authority to, get stuff burned as needed, I think another thing that was a curious question at that deal was, OBN throws a lot of numbers out there, and, it's no issue that we've got an issue with some of the numbers they're throwing out there, but there were some questions on those numbers, of the 300 arrests, how many have been convicted, which is almost none,
Right.
But another good question was, the OBN saying that they've, seized X million plants, and about 200,000 pounds of finished, product. And so one of the questions is kind of what happens to that product.
Yes. So technically it's supposed to be destroyed.
All right.
Now, honestly, that we got enough labs. If it's actually finished product, why not do something with that product for the cancer patients,
Right.
for our veterans, the people? I mean, as well as I do, we got probably a couple thousand different veterans that uses cannabis. Why can't we help them out with it?
Right. One thing I had asked that of OBN, I think it was like year two, what happens here? And what they told me was that there were liabilities involved once the product come in, them letting it back out. Now, that's interesting, and I'm going to tell you why.
That's very interesting, but I want to hear your version of it.
My version of it is that, I understand that, something else that got created early on is something called a receivership. Okay. If someone dies and owns a business, or for some reason the inventory's up in the air, that product can be put into a receivership, which can then actually distribute that product. So it may be a little bit different, of what's going in, but then, you also hear stories too.
Yeah.
You hear stories about, what happens. And if we're not going to go down the rabbit hole here, but if you're familiar with the history of narcotics enforcement in our country, you would know that from time to time, product is seized and it just kind of disappears, and next thing you know, we're funding a third world war, some an overthrow of a third world country dictatorship or something. Yeah, and no one is. I'm not sitting here just going to start throwing rocks randomly,
Yeah.
but what I can say is this. I think, my opinion, is that when you're dealing with dollars, or you're dealing with something like this of value, and the state tells us all the time about the corrupting influence of drugs and drug money and all of those things, that I think that I'd like to see a little more open accounting. X amount here says, I mean, if we've got inventory tracking on everything that we're doing, why not have, tighter inventory tracking
Well,
there, if nothing else, just to, lay to rest any concerns.
yes, yes. The conspiracies
Yes.
come out.
Yes.
It nips it in the butt very quick.
Yeah, yeah. The conspiracies that come out, and then you get the news clip from yesterday about a DEA agent up in the Northeast that was doing XYZ like we're describing for years, and got convicted, lesser charges now. So, I mean, it's all a conspiracy until you admit it, right?
Well, so don't quote me on it, but it's somewhere, because that started at 10:05, but it's somewhere around 11:30, 11:27,
Hmm.
when Barrett Brown was on there speaking on behalf of OMA.
Right.
And he talked about they closed down facilities because of mold and issues like that. I have personally been in facilities that have the mold on the walls that you know damn well it's not a medical program.
Yeah, right. Or even consumer safe of any variety.
I call bullshit on. I would like to see how many licenses they've actually pulled because of filth and contaminants in a facility.
Well, and again, that goes back to, that kind of that great big missing set of data. I don't want to say missing, but on any of these cases, I don't care if there had been 10,000 of them. That's a small voting universe for a lot of professionals. And, to go back through and say, again, this many on administrative action. I mean, I'd like to know, out of the 150 or 170 that got a letter on their sign not being right, even if it was a little tiny minor font thing or an error by the, that resulted, there were like 170 of them. How many of those resulted in someone surrendering their license or their license being taken away? There are so many subsets of different actions, in here.
So then, for the sign deal, you brought the sign up because when shortly before that ever happened, we had a grow, and I had an OMA inspection come out, and it was probably the second, maybe the third OMA inspection I'd been through on my personal grow or my commercial grow, but it was for me personally. And it was raining. That inspector said, "Hey, your sign's not right. I'm gonna have to flag you for that." What do you mean my sign's not right? And she said, "Well, it's got to be 18 by 24. No, man, regulation states a minimum of 18 by 24. Mine's a 24 by 52. She said, "Yeah, it can't be." "What are you talking about? It can't be. Here's the regulations that says it." He said, "That and the numbers and letters aren't all the same size." I said, "Doesn't say they have to be. It says a minimum of 2-inch black font." I said, "I can quote you what the regulation actually want me to."
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, "Well, are you sure they're 2 inches?" "Yes, ma'am. Would you like to take measure and go measure it? It's raining, but I don't care. I'll stand right here and wait for you." And it's funny that you brought up the sign.
Mhm.
I remember going through that with one of OMA inspectors, and she didn't like it. But I told her, I said, "Look, lady, I can do it one of two ways. You can flag me all you want to, and I will make a few phone calls, and we're going to talk about this because I know what's in regulations. I do this for a living."
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't like it. Oh, she didn't like it not one bit.
No, and that's again, that's that's again, it's just another unfortunate chapter. It's one of those things where, again, when the law was written, it was written into the law that if you didn't have your sign, it was automatic license revocation,
Yes.
no due process, no nothing.
Yep.
And then what was interesting about it was that it was a random sampling. because there were only 177 notices sent out to probably 7,000 licenses at the
Yep.
time, so again, the thing is why of all things was that a enforcement concern? Remember, the director has a massive amount of leeway.
Yes.
The director, when you go to OMA court, that judge is not your final judge. The director is your final judge
Correct.
at the end of the day, and can intercede in the process at any time in any way.
Yes.
It's that simple. And so, the question is just, I mean, why of all of the different things to be worried about enforcement, was it this damn sign thing,
Well, watching. You need to make sure and go out there once your license changed from a GAA to GAAI or GAAO. You need to go out there and update your signs because it's still in regulations that if your sign is not updated and kept, they can still revoke your license for you.
Yeah, and I mean, it's again in law, it's automatic revocation. You want to talk about just a laundry list of things that really should be cleaned up in statute, and I mean, we can ask for that. Let's see what the hell happens. But, the thing is that, like, for any random grow, the easiest and cleanest way for you to just get your license killed is your sign.
Yep.
You can sell product out the back door to minors, and it's a fine.
Yep.
Again, you get into that when I was talking earlier about, is this a criminal or an administrative action? And those licenses and registrations are a certain shield from
Yes.
criminal charges.
Yes.
And I'm not advocating anyone go use your license as a shield to sell marijuana to kids. I'm simply pointing out the obvious disparity. And fortunately, they hadn't messed with that sign thing in the meantime that I know of. But I mean, again, when I just hear, when there seems to be a zeal for shutting down businesses, guys, I mean, you better stay on your P's and
Yeah,
Q's.
it's the little things. There's a lot of little things in those regulations that need fixed, that needs addressed. They took out, and I don't have it with me, but it's wrote down on my desk. I think it was February or June of 2023. They did away with the filth and contamination logs. It's not required to have those now because it's not in regulations no more. They even removed it off of the inspection sheet. I have a problem with that. This is medical, and even when it becomes recreational, we should still make sure everybody's got clean product.
Right. And I mean, that's the thing is that, again, it's like, be it medical, be it recreational, it's a consumer product. And the marijuana products are the same.
Yep.
Whether it's recreational, whether it's medical, it's all the same thing. And I mean, for any given consumer product, there has to be consumer safety testing.
You would think.
With the track record of American industry and capitalism, it's always a good thing to
Yeah.
have some consumer safety protocols in there.
Yeah. But, we'll see. But yeah, and after watching that intern study, I'm really worried about what our legislation is going to look like this coming season.
Yeah.
Because after that, you could see the disheartening in their faces on this stuff is not working. We're gonna have to get stricter on our policies, and that has me concerned as a compliance person. I'm concerned about it.
Well, and that's the thing, and that's what I'm glad that we're starting to have this conversation now, because again, we talk about processes, right? We talk about there's a different season for everything, and this is the time you see lawmakers doing it. It's something that that we do year in, year out, and want to try to there's opportunity here to continue to doggedly just say, hey, here's what's going on, here's what could be done, and then be ready for just kind of whatever comes out of the chute for the beginning of legislative session, and go in and see what we can do to work with that. I mean, so yeah, we'll see. you know, we'll see what's going on, but it's good that we saw the questions being asked, you know, and you know, we're gonna, you know, and it's gonna be important the next couple of months, that the next couple of months that we continue to have these conversations and, you know, really make sure that we're having them with lawmakers.
Yes.
At the end of the day, like for example, the sign thing, if you say, hey, OMA, this needs to change, they say, well, in that case, this is actually written into law. So if we want to get that section opened up, then we've got to go and get the law changed underneath it to do it, you know? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it really is. That it is. That it is. I mean, I get that there's, you know, so many hours in the day, so on and so forth, but there are a lot of efficiencies missed, you know, like Secret Shopper, for example, you know, a lot of yeah, so I look forward to, you know, kind of continuing to, you know, run that on here in the over the next month or two. Obviously, we'll have a lot more free time after November 3rd.
Yeah, because it's just with it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because if things go the right way with it, you know, then it's, I think your phrase is complying to one master instead of two.
Right, right. You can't serve two masters. And there really is a lot of efficiency that you know, that can be picked up on the regulatory side and the regulatory structure, you know, in this industry. So it is going to be interesting to see, you know, kind of what they come out with, you know, here in the spring, and again to get in there and work on it. I mean, it's it, I'd say this though, for everyone tracking legislative agency stuff, you know, looking at the politics of it. Remember, 2026 is the biggest election year in 8 years. Just about everything's up for grabs.
Yes.
And I mean, getting anything done in the legislature in an environment like that is nearly impossible unless it's something they all agree will look good on their campaign literature. And then that's where the concern comes in, because beating up on illegal marijuana grows is something that ranks high on their priority list. We just have to make sure that when they're looking to do that, that they're hitting the bad guys and not the good guys as much as possible.
Yep. I actually invited some deputy sheriffs out to certain grows. Hey, you guys want to see what a legal entity looks like? Come on out. Let's look at this. You know, the grows like, hey, yeah, bring them out, because they have nothing to hide. The
Mm-hmm.
more we can educate people, the better off they are.
That's it.
Because there's probably 10 to 1, I'm assuming. 10 legal for 1 ever illegal.
Right.
And it may be even less than that now that we've been chopping down on the licenses.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah. It's getting down.
just industry does not mean you're a person.
Right.
Strive to make sure we're legal.
Right. No matter how much some agencies stretch the definition of what is illegal. So, well, yeah, it's good talk to you on this deal.
Yep. The only thing I'd like to see too is, especially with pre-pack, there needs to be an expiration date on that flower, especially with the moisture content.
Yep. There's definitely some work to there's definitely some work to get done. And again, you know, one thing I find is that you know, for whatever reason, you know, we can't look. Here's the thing: we can't tell these folks in government what to do.
Right.
You know, they can tell licensees out here what to do. You know, but we can't really tell them what to do. All we can do is just, continue to put a good foot forward, lay out actual solutions. I mean, they're in a total conundrum on these abandoned grows.
Yes.
You know, we've put policies out. We can double back. We can just say, hey, you know, if you were wanting to do this, this is something you might actually get industry support for.
Yeah.
You know,
100%.
Let's take a look at the grow bond deal. You know, as bad as it is, you know, and there's some ins and outs to it. but I know that there are better ways to get that done. You know, I know there are better ways to get that done. It's just, again, you know, what appetite is there in an election year?
Yeah.
I'll tell you this. The answer to that question is going to depend greatly on how many signatures we turn in for 837.
With their 1,875 manufacturing license left,
Uh-huh.
if you would, if everybody pay their $2,500, that's $4,687,500.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me how many grows we clean up with that instead of having to pay this bond every year that they can't use.
Yeah, especially if we make sure we open it to competitive bidding.
Yes. Yes.
And we look at the fact that, and these are one of the baselines that has to get laid down, all those all the fabric pots with soil in it, that's not hazardous material. That's
No.
black gold,
Yes.
you know. And at the end of the day, you know, most you know, whatever fertilizers or anything that are out there that they're really concerned about, most likely it is in a tote that can be picked up and rolled off to a facility. I mean, there's a range, you
Yes.
know, it's not radioactive. So,
It's not
yeah.
a chemical plant.
Right.
You do chemical plant.
Yeah, it's not that big of a deal. You know, you check, you know, no watershed. Okay, boop, boop. There's not even really soil remediation that has to happen in most of this. Right. And then the other thing is, you know, in the interim study, of course, they focused in on a couple of places where, you know, like say construction sites, there happens to be some poo on the ground. Right? Someone running into an open pit instead of into a septic. Anyone that's lived in rural Oklahoma has known someone, you know, maybe they throw some quicklime in the hole when they pull that RV up to their new spot out there at the lake. And, you know, it's going to be a couple of months before that septic gets in. Well, you know, I mean, what about an outhouse? Right? So here's the thing. Number one, I'm not saying that there should be poo around and people being nasty. I am not here to justify that. Okay. That said, on one hand, we've got the state in here acting like 30 gallons of crap on the ground is a public health and safety emergency. Yet at the same time, they're happy to take all the poo out of Oklahoma City and spread it over hundreds of acres of farmland and call it fertilizer. So what is this? Is this a public safety emergency, or is this humanure that a bunch of folks out in rural Oklahoma are tired of having, you know, spread across hundreds of acres? Is it fertilizer, or is it this public safety emergency that then justifies this crazy action against an entire industry? That's a conversation that we've got to have up there. If you're going to beat us up over a couple of, you know, a few folks that were a little nasty, but then you think it's okay to do the same thing over hundreds and thousands of acres out here, we got to have a talk.
Like I said, I've been to those types of facilities.
Mhm.
We don't go back to them for a
Right,
reason,
right.
but it is very disgusting. And if I was in those, I'd be complaining about it.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, Jed, I did over 1,000 inspections. I mean, I did over 1,000 back in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
And those were 15 or 20 facilities out of 1,000 that you would see like that.
Yeah.
They're judging us all as those facilities, and we can't do that. We
yes.
can't be judged like that. I can show you facilities that if I drop my food on the floor, I would eat it because they're that clean.
Right.
They're a true medical program or a true consumer.
It's a consumer safe program.
Yeah.
Right.
They're few and far between, and I think they are working on getting them shut down and getting them cleaned up. Well, shut down anyway, not cleaned up. But they're not. Our whole industry is getting judged off of that.
Right, and it's not the norm anymore. You know, when you look at the license counts that have dropped, I mean, you know, the thing is that, you know, there's confirmation bias in the agencies, you know, and they've got themselves so worked up in that story, you know, that line that they're pushing to help gain funding or whatever they need is so strong that, you know, I think they may be surprised to find out that no, out of that 10,000, 2,500 of those are, serious people that are in business and are looking to stay in business.
Well, for the COO.
Right, exactly. So they can start back up, you know?
That's the sad thing. Facility that new compliance worked for, they lost it because of their COO. They're waiting on just the permit to be signed or stamped for their fire alarm system. That's all they're waiting on.
Right.
That facility is so clean. The only thing they don't do is wear a gown when they're in their rooms.
Yeah, and that's just, I mean, that's just, it's, 5 jobs here, 50 jobs here. These jobs are not, decent paying jobs in rural Oklahoma, newsflash, are not easy to come by. And every time, one of these callous actions happens, oh, okay, well, you're screwed because you don't have this thing retroactively that we were told you were good all through this time. But sorry about your luck right before the holidays. Here's 30 people out of work.
It was over the COO.
Mhm.
Me and my wife built my building almost 30 years ago. We didn't hire nobody. We live out in the county.
Right,
I knew it wasn't going to pass for a COO because I did not hire an electrician come wire. It
right,
was actually a weld shop.
yeah,
Uh, so we shut it down instead of trying to market. It wasn't going to be feasible for us to build a brand new building.
mm-hmm,
So we shut it down. But what really aggravated me was, and I told Keith Bryant when he was at that PCA meeting when he came and spoke there, was my certificate of compliance that I got from our county commissioners is stamped, notarized, and signed. Nothing else is needed. Nothing else was needed for me to have my license and operate.
mm-mm. No, and I mean, that's the thing, is that it's, when, and that's it's the bone I pick with OBN since Director Anderson said the quiet part out loud, you know, and, they come back and said, well, in context, we were actually saying this. And I say, well, no, I saw a period, a pause, and even if qualifier. And here's the thing, we're known by our works, you know, OBN would say, well, in context, you know, when the director said, even if they're legal, we're working to push them out. And they say, oh, no, 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 no. In context, he was saying this. I'd say this. In context, 3 letters, 1 term, COO. You're known by your works. The last 3 years, here's the thing. OBN knew, number one, that we'd all been granted COCs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they were in the room for those talks when that was created. Okay, we get down the road, everyone's told, okay, you're good to go. And then OBN, without any rules change, with no new law changing that, just determined that, okay, this is required by state law, so now we can require this, and that is the basis. This has a massive economic impact. This is something that should have been done in rules. This is something that should have been addressed with the legislature instead of just a packet coming out, as it did. And, the thing here is that timing, okay? Prior to that time in early 2023, when the first supplemental packet come out, they'd been OBN, State Fire Marshal, OMA, had been talking about what to do about fire safety, and some of these had been talking for a year. And then those talks kind of just petered out. And then, unbeknownst to anyone, OBN makes this choice. Now, OBN knowing that the state fire marshals typically processing 1,500 COOs a year, but they created an overnight demand for 30,000 of them to be done in a 6-month time period.
So I spoke about this a couple days ago on one of my live feeds. The problem I have with that is I personally, I don't judge OBN on that. And the only reason I'm going to say this is because at a PCA meeting, I am not a member of PCA, but I was at a couple of their meetings. Director Anderson was there and he was speaking. Keith Bryant was there and he was speaking on for the state fire marshal's office.
Mm-hmm.
But Director Anderson specifically said he was told this is state law and he has to enforce it. Now, whether or not there's any truth to that statement, I can't tell you that because I was not in the meeting whenever that was stated. I was there when Director Anderson actually said that at the PCA meeting, that it came from the Attorney General's office, that it is state law and he has to enforce it.
Well, and that maybe qualifies under political pressure, but again, it's not the Attorney General to tell a director who is hired by a commission that was established to be structured the way it is to prevent corruption from the executive branch.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? Okay, I get a little bit of, but I mean, and that's the deal, is that no. But the truth is that none of this happens without the support of the Attorney General.
Yes.
But again, no is an answer. Hey, DARE program guys, just say no. And that's the thing. So it's all that does is just, if that's the case, then it just makes them partners in crime, in my estimation.
Part of funding, I believe, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe part of that OMA funding from our licenses is for them legislation to be able to use that money as needed. Why did we not take some of that money and funnel over to the state fire marshal's office to help with the COO side of it?
Help them out with staffing, something, I mean, this is a known, and the thing is that here's though where it becomes, government as a whole, and this is the principle of it. Okay. Government as a whole told us that we needed X. We all got X. Government as a whole then said, no, you have to have this now. And but we told you didn't have to have this, but now we're saying you're due. And if you don't, you're out of business. They are taking your property. It is an unconstitutional taking. And, OBN likes to say all day that, we haven't been beaten district court. Well, that's subjective. And I've heard recently that, you guys might not want to get so far as a jury trial with some of these flimsy ass cases, seen them backing off a little bit. It's real easy to make that claim when you're in the business of pleas.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, as you know, we're dwindling down on numbers as far as licensees.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're getting down to the people that have done everything they can to be legal. And their license are still subjective to getting revoked for different reasons, whether it's OMA, OBN. Now you're getting into people that have money that can afford to fight these. Before they wasn't getting fight because some of them were illegal activity, some of them was just mom and pops and they couldn't afford to fight it. But now you're cutting into some that they can afford to fight it and they're going to fight it.
Yeah. No, and that's, when OBN initiated this action, when I talked to the state fire marshal and such, and, I told him at the time, and this was, June 2023, sat down and talked to him and I was like, guys, look, I get what you're doing here, right? I get what you're doing here. And you're, by doing this, what you are going to do is you're going to basically sort some data. You're going to find out real quick, who's serious out there and who's not. Yeah. And, and that's what we saw. They sent out about 2,500 letters, I believe, 800 to 1,000 of them out the gate, never responded.
Yes.
And I talked to OBN after they kind of saw that, in that October, November, and said, look, you had a number that just didn't register. Okay. Then you got those that got the letter out of that 2,500. A third of them didn't respond. And my conversation with them at that point in time was, okay, well, what do you bet they're probably doing something other than not having a COO wrong out there? Well, I mean, automatic. And I said, okay, well, go focus on those guys that didn't respond. I mean, look, number one, if you're summoned to court, you show up to court.
Yeah.
That's just a fundamental in America, right? If you don't, then if you're not even showing up for your court date, can't help you. You're doomed. You got to, answer show cause, right? Well, okay, so that eliminates that. Well, interesting because this maneuver has, good return on investment of enforcement dollars, right? Now you get to the next part, the folks that all right, well, we're going to try. No, this isn't. We're just going to go ahead and surrender now because that's going to be more than what we want to do. We're going to go ahead and stop this. Okay, well, that takes us down to this number now. We're down to around 700, 750 that are the folks that are likely to fight.
Yes.
And are legal operators. So my point to OBN 2 years ago is that you're going to get to this. Here's your eventuality over 3 years. Here's all of our eventuality. And what my hope is, when I told them this, is that your administrative process is just like a gas pedal. You can put your foot on or off the gas anytime you want to. And my hope is that after you pull this hat trick, and you get the easy ones out of there that are probably 90% of them need to go on that first pass that don't even respond. But you're going to hit a point now where you're literally wasting our tax dollars on enforcement because the amount of effort that it is now taking OBN to fight back against a large collective of these, they and 2 times during this process, they worked to, modify the law underneath the people that were in these proceedings at the time that we had to stop at the legislature. I think it was 3567. Remember it was like this. Everyone gets their notice in January, February. Hey, you're getting called in for a hearing. We're going to start having these like the 1st of March, something like that, right?
Yeah.
But then they got pushed off maybe in April. Well, maybe in June. Well, what was going on during that time? 2 bills, 3567 and 1635. Okay. 3567 was their request bill in the House. It's a cleanup bill. Oh, it was big. It did a lot of basic cleanup, but it also took away your right to present evidence in an administrative hearing, which means you could not present that in a district court appeal. In short, fortunately, we were able to get that language cut out because we raised all holy hell over it and said, no, you are not taking our due process rights. So OBN was parlaying off those hearings, waiting to see if they were able to literally shift the ground underneath, literally shift the footing of all the legal arguments out from underneath while they held people in stasis. That's the type of, and so when you look at how these have drug on, you're looking at those overlapping processes, what's going on, and you can see where OBN realized out the gate, they won't admit it, they bit off more than they could chew at the end of the day. And now they're in a quagmire. We had this discussion, but at the end of the day, and this is why I give them such hell over it, you don't put people into business and then simply take their property just because you got a quota.
Yeah.
There's principles involved in this, Smokey.
There is.
And there's, the market takes care of that, and again, that's, I think that down around the numbers we are, if we got the openly sold illicit stuff, at the DoorDash and the gas, all of those folks, given the return of probably 35% market share, who's here now, probably actually, you're starting to look for better days. And, the agencies have just calmed down.
Yeah. We're not saying.
There's plenty of it. There's a ton of it. Always has been.
But I'm scared of what November 1st is going to bring. Because if you remember right, and I know we've talked about it years ago, but when that letter first came out from OBN, the very first paragraph was for manufacturers to get their COO. The 3rd paragraph down, I'm going off of memory, it's been a while since I looked at my letter, but it stated all medical marijuana businesses was required to have COO. So a lot of these dispensaries, they didn't worry about it. They did not worry about a COO at all. And I've been everyone we go to, hey, you guys better be getting on your COO.
I told them to. I mean, the moment that came out,
yes.
You guys better get going too.
This year, they had to fill out their packet.
Yep.
They had required for a COO. I'm worried about what November 1st is going to bring.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be it's going to be real interesting to see kind of what happens, and I'm sure we'll all be dealing with the with the aftermath and the fallout of that and what that looks like.
Because and for the simple fact, and here's a little bit more free advice from you guys that's watching. If I'm a dispensary owner and I purchase product from another dispensary, which is legal, or I purchase product from manufacturer, if their OBN is not active, that's an illegal transaction on your part for accepting that product.
Hmm.
That's $5,000 fines from OMA. It's $15,000 for each package you sold off of that.
Well, looks like everyone's got about 2 weeks to look alive, do the inventory shuffle that everyone has gotten way too familiar with having to do because emergency clauses and all sorts of other ignorant shit, but yeah, it's yeah, we're gonna see what happens. We're gonna see what happens November 1st. But I just look forward at whatever point we're able to hopefully get move beyond this. And get through this.
Yeah, because you brought some points up that I'm interested in too, because I took it when Director Anderson made that speech. I didn't take it as that away, but now that you mention it, I'm gonna have to start going back and looking at it, because the way I took it was because we've seen the legal businesses that are doing 10 times more than what they should out the back door of him trying to shut down the legal businesses because of the illegal. That's how I took it.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it the way you're explaining it now.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have to go back and do a little research and look into that.
Well, and I mean, when you really lay in and watch what these agency actions are compared to what was going on at the legislature, and you look how they work to move those things. I mean, these are, I will give it to OBN. These are some very, very intelligent people. They're probably some of the most intelligent people in state government. They are thinking multiple steps, months, and years ahead. Okay.
Yes.
That being said, it's not a conspiracy. As I like to say, guys, you don't got to lie to kick it. None of us have been more harmed than anyone in the state than by the folks that, working to get gone. But, we need to probably start having a real talk about this quota quest
Yes.
that you got on. And again, we really can't hold OBN accountable per se,
Right.
but lawmakers, that's lawmakers' job, and that's who we have to hold accountable. So it's really important that everyone make sure you're talking to your lawmakers and know what's going on. Whether they are helpful, whether they're not helpful. When folks like myself go and have a conversation with them at the Capitol, and I know that you've talked to them, then they don't get to do the blank stare. You don't know what I'm talking about. I'll start, I'll say, hey, I know you know what I'm talking about here. Absolutely.
Don't just ignore him or straight to the Capitol and talk to somebody else. You need to start out with your local representative, your local senator.
Oh, absolutely. And that's an interesting thing. We know that we've got a couple of point folks and that's the way that, especially the House is structured. They've got a lot of different issues. No one can be the all-knowing guy on all these. You can't know all of this shit. And so what they do is they have different people. It's like the guy on this or the guy on this. And that's where a lot of folks turn to look to how to vote, follow that lead on policy. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. And so we all get accustomed to reaching out to those individuals.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you got to start with your lawmakers first, because the first fair question one of those folks should have is, have you talked to your lawmaker? You need to do that first, because here's the thing. Let's say that you call up, say, leader and want them to do something. If they help you without talking to your guy first, they're stepping on toes, right? You're putting them in a bad spot. You should be checking that box and saying, hey, I just want to let you know, talk to, my guy about this and this and this. He's got this information,
And they will. I know that instance this year alone. I was talking to my representative and he said, hey, let me get back to you on that. And he did. He called me back. He said, hey, I'm going to have Representative Marty call you because he's over the tobacco industry or marijuana industry on the bills. And he said, I'm going to have him reach out to you. And he did. TJ reached out to me, it's a different conversation in general, but
right.
And a couple of days later, I seen my rep again, and his representative Brady said, hey, did he get a hold of you? I said, yes, he did. Thank you very much.
Yep.
You know, if it would have been me just calling TJ, would TJ talk to me? No, no, he would not have.
Right. Right.
But with it coming from my representative, hey, I need to talk to this guy about these questions, and he kind of had to.
Right, right, and it really just generally helps the overall temp, you know. And again, it just normalizes us to them. And I mean, we've got some real turds out there, you know. And we'll just kind of have to, we'll just leave that there. But we take notes on that, and you know, there's hope for a new tomorrow. You know, primaries are next year, guys. You
Yeah.
know.
Pay attention because people finish me still, and they don't forget.
Well, I mean, that's one thing that you know, that's one thing that you know we've demonstrated here with 837 is that you know, surprise, surprise, there's a bunch of us that you know that we talk, you know, and are going to be here. And again, for all of those open locations, everyone keep in mind there's a whole bunch that are closed, and there's a whole bunch of folks out there that probably aren't happy with how they have been dealt with by our agencies the last couple of years. No.
Because they're out money.
Yeah.
They-
Yep. 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 Well, I really appreciate everyone that's out, you know, working on getting the signatures, getting that stuff done. You know, we've got a couple of weeks left here. There's still time to, you know, everyone double down. You can get a bunch more in. We'll be circulating and picking those back up next week, you know, ahead of our November 1st deadline to get them back into Oklahoma City. We've getting organized to have folks out running those routes, collecting from y'all. So put your best foot forward. At the end of the day, you know, making this program move forward, locking in medical as an actual right, and really resolving a lot of the issues really will be helped, you know, by passage of 837 because it's number one, it will put some guardrails in place. It'll fix some wrongs that we're not getting fixed otherwise, and it's going to crack open the conversation and the statutory language that backs our program across the board to where we can, you know, potentially political will, you know, can do amazing things sometimes when the time is right. So I hope that everyone's out there making the most of it.
That's a fact.
Well, it's good. A good
Yeah,
talk.
it's
I
good
guess we'll hop
discussion.
off and come back around.
So-